I used to think the silence of Taquara Ridge was the worst sound in the world. I was wrong. The noise is worse. The stable simulation, as Marta called it, has no crickets or wind in the trees. It has tires screeching on asphalt, horns that sound like screams of digitized rage, and a hum, a constant electrical hum that drills into my ears and makes my dead arm vibrate like a broken tuning fork. We've been driving for 3 hours. The old Beetle is the only thing that seems to have real weight in this place. I look out the window. The city rises around us, mirrored glass buildings that touch a metallic gray sky. Gigantic billboards displaying ads for products I don't recognize, with models smiling smiles that are too wide, too perfect. "Don't look at the cameras," Marta warned, without taking her eyes off the road. She drove with surgical paranoia, avoiding the main avenues, cutting through side streets filled with trash and graffiti. The facial recognition algorithms on this server are aggressive. If they cross-reference your data with the corrupted file you brought from the ridge, the system crashes. And if the system crashes, they send the technicians. "Technicians?" I asked, holding the lead box in my lap. Lucas's cubes were agitated inside, clattering against the walls of the box like trapped beetles. "You don't want to meet the technicians," was all she said. My right arm, that piece of inert charcoal wrapped in dirty rags, started to hurt. It wasn't muscular pain. It was interference. We drove past a 5G transmission tower, disguised as an artificial palm tree. I felt a needle-like sting in my shoulder. The charcoal heated up. "We are too exposed," I muttered. "My arm, it's picking up the city's signal. It's too much information. It's like 1,000 voices screaming GPS coordinates inside my bone." Marta braked abruptly in front of a rusted iron gate in a dead-end alley. "We're here. Welcome to the dead zone." The place didn't look like a safe house. It looked like an electronics shop that had exploded from the inside out. It was an old industrial warehouse with windows covered in aluminum foil and thick iron grates. We went inside. The interior was a labyrinth of cables, CRT monitors, the old ones with thick glass, disassembled servers, and piles of scrap. It smelled of soldering iron, burnt dust, and stale coffee. "The signal doesn't get in here," Marta said, locking the door with 3 heavy deadbolts. "Faraday cage reinforced with copper and, well, with some of that red clay I brought from your land." She walked over to a clean workbench in the center of the mess and turned on a white LED light. "Put the box here. Let's see the damage." I placed the lead box on the table. My hands were shaking, the flesh one from fear, the charcoal one from residual resonance. I opened the lid. The black obsidian cubes stopped moving the moment the light touched them. They lay there, inert, cold, dozens of them, what was left of my cousin Lucas. "Now what?" I asked. "How do we fix a person who's become a set of dice?" Marta adjusted her glasses and picked up a strange tool. It looked like a tuning fork, but hooked up to a car battery by bare wires. "We don't fix the flesh, Leandro. The flesh is gone. We realign the frequency." She turned the device on. It emitted a deep hum. She touched the tuning fork to the largest cube, the one I suspected held the core of his consciousness. The sound changed from a deep hum to a high-pitched screech. The cube floated. It levitated about 2 inches off the table, spinning slowly. "It's working," I whispered. Marta increased the power. Other cubes began to levitate, drawn to the first like moths to a flame. Click, clack, click. The sound of them coming together was dry, mineral. Before our eyes, a shape began to construct itself in the air. It wasn't human, not yet. It was a spiral of black blocks, a chaotic tower, desperately trying to find logic. And then the voice came. Not from the cubes. It came from an old speaker in the corner of the room, which was unplugged from the wall. Lucas's magnetic induction was so strong that he used the speaker as a mouth. Voice, digital, glitching, oscillating between high and low pitches. "Leandro, the sky is fake. The stars are dead pixels." "Lucas," I yelled, stepping closer to the table. "Lucas, focus on my voice. You're safe." The pile of cubes shuddered. The pieces rotated, reconfiguring themselves, and suddenly they formed a face. It was a crude, pixelated face made of black blocks, but it was him. The cube mouth didn't move, but the sound from the speaker became clearer. "Safe? No one is safe on Server B, cousin. This is the waiting room for the slaughterhouse." Marta turned off the tuning fork. The cube structure remained floating, sustained by my cousin's own iron will. "What did you see in the transition, boy?" Marta asked directly. The cube face turned to her. "I saw the source code of the city. Leandro, look out the window, now." I hesitated. "Look!" the voice on the speaker yelled, blowing out the bass. I went to one of the windows covered with aluminum foil. With my left hand, I tore a small piece away, creating a peephole. I looked out on the street. It was night now. The city lights glowed outside. Cars drove by. People walked on the sidewalk, staring down at their phones. Everything normal. "I don't see anything, Lucas. Just the city." "Look at the shadows, Leandro. Not the people. They're shadows." I focused. There was a man in a suit waiting at the pedestrian crossing. The street lamp shone down on him. His shadow was cast onto the ground. But the shadow wasn't still. The shadow was thrashing. It writhed on the asphalt, as if it were screaming, pounding against invisible walls, trying to break free from the man's feet. And the man, he just stood there, motionless, staring at his phone, completely oblivious to the fact that his own 2-dimensional projection was in agony. I looked at another person, a woman with a dog. The dog's shadow was normal. The woman's shadow was on its knees, hands on its head, in a pose of absolute despair. I backed away from the window, feeling the air leave my lungs. "The shadows are alive?" I asked, walking back to the table. "No," Lucas's voice replied, cold and analytical. "The shadows are us, the people walking out there. They are the avatars, empty programs, executing work and consuming routines. The shadows are the real consciousnesses, trapped, flattened into 2 dimensions, being dragged across the asphalt day after day." Suddenly, all the lights in the warehouse flickered. The turned-off monitors powered on by themselves, displaying blue static screens.
My charcoal arm jerked violently, raising itself and pointing at the front door. The tips of the black fingers began to heat up, turning light gray, then red. "They found us," I said, feeling the vibration in the bone. "Impossible," Marta retorted, running to a control panel. "The shielding is intact. There's no signal getting in." "It's not a radio signal, Marta," I said, watching the iron door begin to vibrate. Bam! Something slammed into the warehouse door, a dry, heavy impact. Bam! The thick, reinforced iron door dented inward. The metal groaned. "The technicians?" I asked, backing away and grabbing the machete I still carried on my belt. Marta pulled a sawed-off shotgun from under the workbench. "No," she said, pale. "Technicians."
The technician's smile widened even further, ripping the synthetic skin on his cheeks to reveal the silver metal mesh underneath. "The cut will be executed now," he said, raising the clipboard. But the clipboard wasn't paper and wood. He pressed a button on the edge, and the object unfolded, transforming into a portable circular saw that spun with a high-pitched, hungry whine. Marta didn't wait. Boom! The sawed-off shotgun roared in the confined space of the warehouse. The impact hit the technician's chest at point-blank range. If he were a man, he would have flown backward. If he were a man, there would be blood. But he just took a faltering step. In the smoking hole of his blue shirt, I didn't see viscera. I saw cables, thick black and red cables, pulsing with a viscous neon fluid. Sparks showered from the wound, lighting up the warehouse like fireworks inside a cave. He looked down at the hole in his chest, then at Marta. The red LEDs in his eyes blinked. "Structural damage detected. Initiating demolition protocol." He lunged forward. The circular saw screamed, aiming for Marta's neck. "Get out of the way!" I yelled, throwing myself between the two of them. I raised my charcoal arm, not as a shield, but as a hammer. When the spinning steel saw touched my dead stone forearm, the sound was unbearable, a screech of metal against mineral that made my teeth vibrate. But the saw didn't cut. The stone of my arm was denser than the matter of that simulation. The cutting disc shattered. I used the creature's recoil and punched, a straight right cross with all the weight of my body and the density of my cursed arm, right in the middle of that smiling face. The impact was dry, brutal. I felt the metal of his skull crumple under my petrified knuckles. The technician's head sunk into his shoulders, his neck giving way with the sound of a hydraulic pipe bursting. "They're tough!" I yelled, shaking the stone hand that felt no pain but transmitted the shock of the impact to my flesh shoulder. "Marta, reload!" But there was no time. Through the busted door, the other red lights advanced. There were 5 more, 10. They weren't identical. The mother used varied templates for urban maintenance. One of them was tall and thin, dressed as a sanitation worker, but his arms were high-pressure hoses dripping green acid. Another looked like a traffic cop, but instead of a left hand, he had a hydraulic cutter capable of severing a truck chassis. They entered the warehouse in silence, a tide of blue and orange uniforms, moving like the coordination of a swarm. "Leandro, the box!" Lucas's voice screamed from the speaker. "Let me go!" I looked at the table. The cube structure was floating, spinning frantically. I ran over, dodging a jet of acid that melted a CRT monitor next to me.
"What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm going to cause a blue screen," the digital voice replied. Marta fired again, blowing out the knee of the traffic cop, but he kept crawling, the cutter snapping in the air. I grabbed the cube structure with my left hand. They were cold, magnetic. "Throw them!" Lucas ordered. "Throw them into the middle of the pack!" I pivoted and hurled what was left of my cousin into the center of the technicians. The moment the cubes scattered in the air, the warehouse's physics broke. The obsidian data didn't hit the floor. They stopped in mid-air, suspended, and began spinning at high speed, creating a vortex. A visible electromagnetic pulse, a violet shock wave exploded out from the cubes. It was the sound of 1,000 modems dialing up at the same time, amplified by a football stadium. The technicians froze. The red LEDs in their eyes blinked erratically. The sanitation worker started walking backward. The cop started bashing his own head with the cutter. "Logic interference," Lucas's voice roared, now coming from all the electronic devices in the warehouse at once. "I'm rewriting their I.O. Run!" Marta grabbed my good arm. "The beetle! Now!" We bolted out the back of the warehouse, kicking aside scrap metal. Behind us, digital chaos ensued. The technicians, confused by Lucas's viral code, started attacking each other. Saws cut hoses, cutters crushed processors. It was a bar fight in a hardware store, but without blood, just oil and sparks. We reached the back patio where the Beetle was parked. Marta jumped into the driver's seat. I threw myself into the passenger side. "What about Lucas?" I yelled, looking at the warehouse door billowing with purple smoke. "He'll find us." Marta turned the key. The Boxer engine choked, coughed, but started. "He's in the cloud now, literally." The car peeled out, knocking down a rotten chain-link fence and landing in a deserted side street. But the city knew. As soon as the tires touched the public asphalt, the street lighting changed. The street lamps, which emitted a sickly yellow glow, turned red, all of them, an entire avenue bathed in the color of a fatal error. "They're routing the traffic to stop us," Marta said, shifting gears violently. We reached an intersection. The traffic light was red, obviously. But that's not what stopped us. The asphalt in front of us rose up. It wasn't a pothole. It was a speed bump that grew. The ground swelled, the bitumen ripped, and a wall of concrete and tar 6 feet high sprouted from the ground in seconds, blocking the street. Marta plaked, tires screeching, the smell of burning rubber invading the cabin. "The ground," I muttered, staring at the barrier. "The city is liquid to them." I looked in the rearview mirror. Another wall was rising behind us. We were being boxed in. "Sidewalk!" I pointed. Marta jerked the wheel to the right. The Beetle hopped the curb, scraping its underbelly, and ran over a metal trash can. We scraped through between the wall of a building and a lamppost that tried, I swear it tried, to lean over and smash our roof. The city was alive, and it was having a seizure to expel us. Manholes exploded, shooting columns of hot steam. Storefronts shattered on their own, throwing shards into the street like fragmentation grenades. And the shadows. As the car tore down the deserted avenue, I looked at the walls of the buildings. The shadows of the people who weren't there were running alongside the car. They were two-dimensional silhouettes projected on the concrete, running on all fours, elongated, distorted. They weren't hunting us. They were fleeing with us. "Leandro," Lucas's voice came from the car radio, static-filled and low. "The tower! Look at the tower!"
I looked through the dirty windshield. In the center of the city, where the tallest commercial building should be, there was something new. It wasn't a building, it was a needle, a thin black tower with no windows that rose until it pierced the gray clouds. It had no lights, it was a hole in the landscape, a vertical dead pixel. And at the top of it, a light pulsed, not golden like the mother's, a white light, cold, sterile. "What is that?" I asked, feeling my charcoal arm freeze, the temperature dropping below zero. "The restore point," Lucas answered through the radio. "It's where they keep the backups. It's where they store the souls before they compress them. If your grandmother still exists, she's in there." Marta looked at the tower, then at the dashboard. The gas tank was on empty. "It's a fortress, Leandro," she said, her voice hard. "That thing must be surrounded by 1,000 technicians and worse." "It doesn't matter," I replied, feeling a cold determination harden my human chest. Suddenly, the car was hit, not by another car, by a cable. A thick steel cable dropped from a high-tension pole, like a whip, and slammed the Beetle's roof. The impact crumpled the metal, nearly crushing my head. Another cable came down, wrapping around the rear bumper. The car was yanked backward. The wheels spun futilely, emitting blue smoke. "We're being fished!" Marta screamed, fighting the steering wheel. I looked up through the cracked glass. Perched on the lamppost, like a metal vulture, was a technician. He wore boots with claws that pierced the concrete of the pole, and from his back